I had 60 seconds before the champagne flutes touched and the bullets tore through his spine. My hands trembled as I folded the receipt into a tight square, the ballpoint ink still wet enough to smudge against my dark skin. The paper felt fragile as a promise, like it might disintegrate before reaching him. Around me, Le Chateau Noir hummed with the low frequency of wealth, baccarat crystal against bone china, muted French conversation, the whisper of cashmere against velvet booth seats. Outside, Chicago's winter wind clawed at the floor-to-ceiling windows. But in here, everything was warm. Too warm. Suffocating. I approached table 1 like I was walking toward my own execution. Seo Min-jae sat with his back to the window, the gold coast glittering behind him like a crown of fire. He looked like he'd been carved from obsidian and ambition. Sharp cheekbones, black hair styled with precision, a tailored Armani suit that probably cost more than my mother's monthly nursing home bill. His hand rested on the white tablecloth, fingers drumming a slow, predatory rhythm. Beside him, Anastasia Volkov leaned in close, whispering something that made her crimson lips curve into a smile. Her teardrop diamond earrings caught the candlelight, throwing fractured rainbows across the table. She looked like a woman in love. She wasn't. 15 minutes ago, I'd heard her order his death. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked on today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. The wine cellar at Le Chateau Noir wasn't really a cellar. It was a temperature-controlled vault in the basement, all glass walls and amber lighting that made the bottles glow like captured sunlight. I'd been sent down to retrieve a 1998 Chateau Margaux for Table 7, threading my way past rows of Bordeaux and Burgundy when I heard a voice, female, sharp, speaking rapid Russian. I froze between the Barolos and the Brunellos, my hand still on the bottle I'd been reaching for. Stole Odin. Akolo okna. Yes, he's at Table 1. By the window. My Russian was limited to menu items at best, enough to know when someone ordered borscht versus blini. But I caught fragments. Table 1. By the window. Sniper. Position. Odin Ubara. Trivazal Kukni. 1 at the bar. 3 near the kitchen. And then she switched, her voice dropping to something that sounded like English, but clipped, efficient, like she was wrapping razor wire around her words. I should have announced myself. Cleared my throat. Made my presence known like a professional. Instead, I stood there, heart hammering, and listened. She switched back to Russian. The bottle in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Chisty Vistral, Kogda Padada Desert. You'll have a clean shot as soon as dessert is served. My breath caught. The air in the wine cellar, climate-controlled to exactly 55 degrees, suddenly felt arctic. She continued in that harsh, consonant-heavy language I couldn't fully parse, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a conversation. It was a confirmation. A countdown. Heels clicked against the stone floor, moving toward the stairs. I pressed myself against the wine rack, praying the shadows and $1,000 bottles would hide me. Through the gaps between vintages, I caught a glimpse of her. Tall, elegant, wearing an off-shoulder black gown that probably cost more than my mother's entire month of medical care. Chocolate brown hair swept into vintage waves. Diamond earrings catching the light like shattered ice. Anastasia Volkov, the woman currently sitting at Table 1, playing the role of devoted fiancée to the man she'd just arranged to have murdered. She disappeared up the stairs, her perfume lingering, something expensive and floral that now smelled like a funeral arrangement. I stood there for 10 seconds. 15. 20. Waiting for my legs to remember how to work. When I finally climbed back up to the main floor, the Margaux forgotten, my brain was sprinting through what I'd heard. Table 1. By the window. 1 at the bar. 3 near the kitchen. Clean shot when dessert is served. I stepped back onto the restaurant floor, and everything clicked into focus with horrifying clarity. Table 1. Corner booth. Seo Min-jae and Anastasia Volkov, Chicago's most talked-about power couple. He was Korean Mafia, Everyone knew it even if no one said it out loud. She was Russian brought for royalty. Their engagement had been society page news for months. A merger disguised as a romance. Or maybe a murder disguised as both. I scanned the restaurant with new eyes, my serving tray pressed against my chest like a shield. One man at the bar. Mid-30s, dark suit, nursing vodka he hadn't actually touched in 20 minutes. He wasn't watching the basketball game on the screen. He was watching table 1. 3 men near the kitchen entrance. They'd been loitering for 15 minutes, menus open but never ordering. 2 had their backs to the wall. The 3rd kept his hand inside his jacket. My heart kicked against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack bone. I looked back at table 1. At Seo Min-jae laughing at something Anastasia said, completely unaware that the woman touching his hand had just orchestrated his execution. That in less than an hour, when the dessert course arrived and everyone was distracted by flambéed crème brûlée or whatever the hell was on tonight's menu for men, maybe more, we're going to put bullets in him. I could walk away. Clock out early. Say I was sick. Let whatever was about to happen just happen. Men like Seo Min-jae didn't end up in my world by accident. He'd earned enemies. Maybe he deserved this. But then I thought about my mother lying in that nursing home bed on the south side, hooked up to machines that tracked her recovery in steady beeps and glowing numbers. I thought about every nurse who'd stayed late to hold her hand. Every doctor who'd fought when the insurance company said no. I thought about mercy, unearned and freely given. I can't just let someone die. So I grabbed a receipt from my apron, clicked my pen, and wrote 8 words that would either save his life or end mine. My reflection in the crystal wine glasses looked ghost pale against my dark skin as I made my way to table 1. Each step felt like walking through water, time stretching and contracting. I was hyper-aware of everything. The scratch of polyester against my skin. The squeak of my shoes on marble. The way Anastasia's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "You're McCallan, sir." My voice came out steady. Professional. Like I hadn't just overheard a murder plot. Like my hands weren't shaking. I set the crystal tumbler down on the white tablecloth, neat and precise. The whiskey caught the candlelight, glowing amber. And then I did the thing every server is trained never to do. I touched him. My thumb pressed against the back of his hand as I slid the folded receipt beneath his glass. The contact lasted maybe half a second, a violation of every rule, every boundary between his world and mine. Seo Min-jae's eyes snapped to mine. They were darker than I expected. Not cold, but calculating, the kind of eyes that saw through skin and bones straight into intention. His gaze held mine for a beat too long, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not attraction, but recognition. Like looking into the eyes of a predator that could either let you pass or tear you apart. "Read it," I mouthed. "Please." His fingers curled around the receipt, palm covering it completely. "Is there a problem with the service, darling?" Anastasia's voice cut through the moment, sweet and poisonous as arsenic. Min-jae's expression didn't change. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip of whiskey, and with his other hand, unfolded the note beneath the table where Anastasia couldn't see. I stood there, tray clutched to my chest, watching his face for any reaction. Nothing. Not a flicker. Not a flinch. Just those dark eyes scanning the 8 words. "Your fiancé sold you out." They're in position. Then his jaw tightened. Imperceptible unless you were looking for it. The smallest tell. He knew. Min-jae set his glass down with a soft clink that somehow cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of calm that preceded violence. "I'd like to propose a toast." Anastasia blinked, her smile flickering. "Now?" "We haven't even ordered dessert yet." "Now." He gestured to me without looking away from her. "Another glass for my fiancé." "The same." I hesitated, looking between them. Anastasia's perfectly made-up face showed the first crack, a tightness around her eyes, a stiffness in her posture. "I already have wine, Min," she said, voice light but strained. "Then you'll have whiskey, too." It wasn't a request. I walked back to the bar on autopilot, poured the second Macallan with trembling hands, and returned. The restaurant continued around us. Laughter, conversation, soft jazz playing over hidden speakers, completely unaware that table one was a bomb waiting to detonate. I set the glass in front of Anastasia. Her red nails gleamed as she reached for it, but Min-jae's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Let's switch," he said softly. "I want a drink from your glass. And you drink from mine." The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Anastasia's laugh came out forced. "That's odd even for you. Is it?" Min-jae's smile was a razor. "I thought couples in love did romantic things like that. Sharing. Trusting." He pushed his glass toward her, holding her gaze. "Or is there a reason you don't want to drink what I've been drinking?" The silence stretched. I stood there frozen, watching Anastasia's face cycle through emotions, confusion, fear, fury, before settling on something carefully blank. "Of course not." She picked up his glass with a hand that trembled just slightly. "To loyalty," Min-jae said. "To loyalty," Anastasia echoed. They drank. Nothing happened. The whiskey wasn't poisoned. But Anastasia's hesitation had confirmed everything. Min-jae set down the glass and looked directly at me. Really looked at me for the first time, taking in my name tag, my face, the fear I couldn't quite hide. "Linda Gonzalez," he read slowly, his accent turning my name into something foreign and dangerous. "Tell me, Linda, do you believe in fate?" My throat closed. I'm not sure, sir." I didn't either. He leaned back in his seat, one arm draped casually over the booth. "Until 60 seconds ago." Anastasia's face went white, and that's when I realized I just started a war. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive deeper, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our dark romance families stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's continue. The restaurant continued its expensive symphony around us. The delicate scrape of silver against porcelain, hushed conversations about quarterly earnings and vacation homes, the jazz quartet in the corner playing something slow and mournful. But at table one, time had frozen. Anastasia's red nails gleamed against the white tablecloth as she reached for her wine glass, her movement suddenly mechanical. Min-jae sat perfectly still, a predator assessing which direction his prey would bolt. "Linda," he said my name again, tasting each syllable like he was learning a new language. "How long have you worked here?" My mouth went dry. 8 months, sir." "And in those 8 months, how many assassination attempts have you witnessed?" The question landed like a slap. Anastasia's laugh came out too high, too forced. "Min, darling, you're scaring the poor girl. She probably just saw someone suspicious and got nervous." "Is that what happened, Linda?" His eyes never left mine. They were obsidian in the candlelight, ancient and depthless. "Did you just get nervous?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The receipt was still in his hand, my handwriting stark against the white paper. 8 words that had just painted a target on my back. A subtle shift rippled through the restaurant. One of the men near the kitchen entrance stood up, his hand sliding inside his jacket. At the bar, the man with the untouched vodka turned his body slightly, angling for a better view of our table. Min-jae saw it too. I watched the calculation flash across his face. Cold, instant, lethal. "I think," he said softly, standing in one fluid movement, "we should discuss this somewhere more private." Anastasia's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. "We haven't had dessert yet. I've lost my appetite." He extracted himself from her grasp with surgical precision. Then he turned to me, and his expression shifted into something that made my blood run cold. Fury. Disgust. The mask of an angry customer about to destroy someone's night. His hand closed around my upper arm like a vice. "You," he hissed loud enough for nearby tables to hear, spilled whiskey on a $12,000 suit. I hadn't. My tray had been empty. But the lie crystallized instantly, giving him a reason to manhandle me, to drag me away from the table without raising immediate alarm. "I'm so sorry, sir." "Sorry?" He yanked me forward, and I stumbled, my hip hitting the table edge. The violence in his grip was real enough to make me gasp, theatrical enough to make the other diners look away in second-hand embarrassment. "Sorry doesn't pay for custom tailoring." He pulled me toward the kitchen entrance, moving fast. Behind us, I heard Anastasia's voice, sharp with panic she was trying to disguise as irritation. "Min, don't be ridiculous. Just send her home." "We can. I'm going to speak to her manager." His voice cut through the restaurant like a blade. "And then I'm going to have her fired." We were 10 feet from the kitchen doors. The 3 men who'd been loitering near the entrance shifted, hands moving inside jackets. I saw the calculation in their eyes. Was this part of the plan? Was Min Jae just being his usual tyrannical self? Or had he figured it out? Min Jae's grip on my arm shifted, his fingers finding the pulse point at my wrist. He pressed down, and I felt my heartbeat hammering against his thumb. "When we go through those doors," he whispered, his mouth so close to my ear that anyone watching would think he was berating me, "you run left. Don't stop. Don't look back." The kitchen doors swung open, and the lights went out. Darkness swallowed Le Chateau Noir whole. Not gradual, not flickering, absolute and instant, like someone had thrown a blanket over the sun. The jazz quartet died mid-note. Crystal glasses hit the floor in cascading crashes. A woman screamed. Min Jae moved. 1 second, I was standing upright. The next, I was being propelled forward through the kitchen doors with enough force to knock the air from my lungs. The emergency lighting kicked in. Dim red bulbs that turned everything into a nightmare landscape of shadows and blood-colored light. The kitchen was chaos incarnate. Chefs shouted in a babble of languages, Spanish, French, Korean. Pans clattered. Something heavy hit the floor. Through the crimson haze, I saw figures moving with purpose that had nothing to do with cooking. "Left," Min Jae's voice cut through the noise. I ran. My cheap work shoes skidded on the slick tile as I bolted past the prep stations, past the industrial ovens radiating heat like open furnaces. Behind me came the sound of impact. Flesh on flesh. A grunt of pain. Something metallic skittering across the floor. I risked a glance back. Min Jae fought like violence was a language he'd spoken since birth. A man in a white chef's coat lunged at him with a blade that was definitely not for dicing vegetables. Min Jae caught his wrist, twisted, and the knife clattered away. He drove his elbow into the man's throat with surgical precision, then spun him into a second attacker hard enough that both men went down in a tangle of limbs. 3 more came, through the swinging doors. Not the men from the dining room. These were kitchen staff, or people wearing kitchen whites as camouflage.
"One of them spotted me."
"The girl," he shouted in accented English. "Grab the girl." Terror shot through me like electricity. I grabbed the first thing my hand found, a pot of boiling stock sitting on the range. And without thinking, without hesitating, I hurled it at him. The liquid caught him across the face and chest. His screams were inhuman, primal. He dropped to his knees, clawing at his burning skin. The smell hit me, scorched flesh and hot metal, and my stomach tried to climb up my throat. "Move, Linda." Min Jae was suddenly beside me, his hand finding the small of my back, propelling me forward again. Blood streaked his white dress shirt, and I couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. We burst through another set of doors into the dry storage area. 50-pound bags of rice and flour were stacked floor to ceiling, creating a maze of narrow passages. The red emergency lighting barely penetrated here, leaving pools of absolute darkness between the shelves. Footsteps thundered behind us. Voices shouted in Russian. Min Jae pulled me into a gap between the shelving units, pressing us both flat against the concrete wall. The space was so narrow that my chest was crushed against his, my face buried in the blood-stained fabric of his shirt. He smelled like expensive cologne and copper and something darker. Adrenaline maybe, or the particular scent of violence. His heart hammered against my forehead. Fast but steady. Not panicked. Just ready. "How many?" I whispered, my breath fogging against his chest. "Too many." His voice was barely audible, his lips brushing the top of my head as he spoke. The kitchen was full of them. This wasn't just a hit. This was an occupation. 3 men entered the storage area, their shadows stretching grotesquely across the walls in the red light. They moved methodically, checking between the shelves, weapons drawn, not guns. Knives. And something that looked like a garrote.
They wanted this quiet.
Min-jae's arm wrapped around my waist, holding me so still I wasn't sure I was breathing. His other hand moved to his ankle, and when it came back up, there was a gun in it. Small. Black. Lethal. The nearest man was 5 feet away. 4. 3. I could see his face now in the crimson glow. Young, maybe mid-20s, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. He was looking right at our hiding spot. Time stretched. I felt every beat of my heart, every molecule of air moving in and out of my lungs. Min-jae's finger rested on the trigger, his body coiled like a spring beneath expensive fabric. The man took another step forward. Then somewhere in the kitchen, glass shattered, followed by shouting in Korean. The man's head whipped toward the sound. He gestured to his companions, and all 3 of them moved back toward the kitchen doors. Min-jae waited until their footsteps faded before exhaling. The breath moved through his chest, expanding and contracting against mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just stood there in the darkness, pressed together by necessity and survival, while chaos raged around us. "Your people," I whispered. "My people." He pulled back slightly, putting an inch of space between us. In the red light, his face looked carved from stone. All sharp angles and shadows. A cut above his eyebrow leaked blood down the side of his face, making him look like something from a nightmare. "They'll create a distraction, but we need to move now." "The back exit is compromised," a voice said from behind us. We spun. A man stood blocking the path to the rear door, backlit by emergency lighting. He was massive, easily 6'4", built like he'd been carved from a mountain, and he was pointing a gun directly at my head. "Sung-ho," Min-jae said. And there was something in his voice I couldn't read. Not fear. Recognition, maybe. Or betrayal. "Sorry, boss." The big man's expression was carefully neutral. "Orders from the top. From Daehyun." The name came out like a curse. "Your cousin sends his regards," Sung-ho said. "And his regrets." Nothing personal. His finger tightened on the trigger. Min-jae moved faster than physics should have allowed. He grabbed a 50-pound bag of rice from the nearest shelf and hurled it at Sung-ho's head. The bag exploded on impact, sending white grains everywhere, creating a snow globe effect in the red light. Sung-ho fired blind. The shot went wide, the report deafening in the enclosed space. Then I was on the floor, Min-jae's body covering mine as bullets punched through rice bags and sent white powder cascading down like rain. Above us, wood splintered. Metal pinged. The world was gunfire and screaming, and the weight of Min-jae's body pressing me into the cold concrete. "Stay down," he growled against my ear. Then he was rolling off me, returning fire. The muzzle flash from his gun lit up the storage room in strobing bursts of white light. Sung-ho went down. Not dead, but hit. He clutched his shoulder, weapon clattering away. 2 more men came through the kitchen doors, and suddenly it was a storm of bullets. I pressed myself flat against the floor, hands over my head, rice grains digging into my palms as they rained down. Something hot grazed my upper arm. Not a bullet, but close enough. The shock of pain made me gasp. The back door now. Min-jae's hand found mine, yanking me to my feet. We ran, stumbling through rice that crunched beneath our shoes like snow. The back door loomed ahead, metal, industrial, marked with a glowing green exit sign. Min-jae hit it at full speed, using his shoulder like a battering ram. The door exploded open. And then we were outside. Chicago winter slammed into us like a freight train. The temperature had to be below 0, the wind screaming through the alley with enough force to steal the breath from my lungs. Snow swirled in frantic spirals, turning the world into a whiteout that was the polar opposite of the restaurant's golden warmth. My server uniform, a thin blouse and slacks designed for climate-controlled elegance, not survival, was criminally inadequate. Within seconds, the wind cut through to my skin, turning my sweat ice cold. My teeth started chattering so hard I bit my tongue. Min-jae didn't slow down. He pulled me down the alley, our shoes crunching through dirty snow and ice. Behind us, the back door banged open again. Voices shouting. A black SUV sat at the alley's mouth, engine running, exhaust creating ghosts in the freezing air. Min-jae wrenched open the back door and physically threw me inside. I landed on leather seats that smelled like new car and gun oil. He dove in after me, slamming the door. Drive. The SUV lurched forward, tires spinning on ice before finding purchase. Through the rear window, I saw figures spilling out of the restaurant's back door. Too many to count. Weapons raised. One of them aimed at our vehicle. The rear windshield spiderwebbed, but didn't break. Bulletproof glass. The sound of impact was dull, distant, like someone tapping on a fish tank. We sped away, leaving Le Chateau Noir behind in a blur of snow and muzzle flash. Inside the SUV, silence descended. The only sounds were our ragged breathing and the whisper of tires on icy pavement. Min-jae leaned forward, speaking rapid Korean to the driver. Instructions. Coordinates. I couldn't tell. Blood dripped from the cut above his eyebrow, spattering on the leather seat. I looked down at myself. Rice grains clung to my clothes and hair like confetti. My arm burned where something had grazed it, the sleeve of my blouse torn and spotted with blood. My hands trembled, not from cold anymore, but from pure adrenaline crash. You're hurt, Min-jae said, his attention snapping back to me. His English returned, slightly accented but perfect. I'm fine. You're bleeding. So are you. He wiped blood from his eyebrow with the back of his hand, barely acknowledging it. Then his fingers were on my arm, examining the wound with clinical detachment that somehow felt more intimate than concern. His touch was surprisingly gentle, considering those same hands had just killed multiple people with ruthless efficiency. Graze, he pronounced. You were lucky. Lucky. I laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. I just burned a man's face off and got shot at in a rice storage room. That's your definition of lucky? You're alive. His dark eyes met mine, and something shifted in them. A microscopic crack in the ice. That's the only definition that matters. The driver said something in Korean. Min-jae responded, then turned back to me. We're going somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't look for us tonight. You mean Anastasia and whoever Daehyun is? His jaw tightened at the name. My cousin. Older by 2 years. Meaner by a lifetime. I thought he was in exile in Seoul. Apparently, I was misinformed. And Anastasia was his from the beginning? I suspect the whole engagement was a setup. A way to get close enough to kill me without raising suspicion. He said it with such cold pragmatism, like discussing a failed business transaction rather than the woman he'd been planning to marry. The pregnancy was probably his, too. Insurance in case she couldn't pull off the hit. A CO heir to legitimize his claim to the family empire. The casual way he dissected the betrayal made my skin prickle. This was a man who saw threats and contingencies, who measured relationships in terms of leverage and risk. And I had just become a variable in his deadly equation. Where are you taking me? The question came out smaller than I intended. Min-jae studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the passing streetlights. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost kind, which somehow made it more terrifying. Thank you for watching the story to the end. Please click on subscribe for more interesting stories.